Hello, and welcome back to Tabletop Thoughts. Today I was going to go through my collection of modern buildings. These are buildings that I put together to run more modern games. It's mostly superheroes at this point. I used it for Power Legion, and I was thinking of maybe using it for Marvel Crisis Protocol, which I never got into. But I was going to go through all my buildings. I'll start with the papercraft buildings I have. Then we'll look at the ones that are homemade. Then we'll look at the ones that were purchased. And we'll end up with the one that I did that was 3D printed. Thank you. Okay, here is one of the first ones I've done. I believe I got all the files to print all these online. I want to say it was Fat Dragon Games, maybe they had a purchase. So it was, I cut out the thing and put actual corrugated paper here to make it a little more realistic, try to add a little rust effects. But it came with the graffiti already on it, and I believe the files were actually selectable, so there was, like, you could say, hey, I want the graffiti or I don't, or, you know, stuff like that. But this is a nice little building. You know, you drop that down here, something like that. It's something to run around. Here's another papercraft building. This one I didn't redo the door, windows. This poster is something I found online and just cut it out and put it on there. But a couple of papercraft buildings. If you don't have access to a 3D printer and you don't have, you know, a lot of money to spend on 3D printed ones or purchase ones, making them yourself, especially with papercraft, does not look too bad. All right, here is a papercraft building that I printed out. It's cardstock. The only thing I don't like about these, when they start getting bigger like this, you can see where, you know, you have to tape it all together. When they get a little warped or something isn't quite just perfect, they kind of bow a little bit. I made this one a newspaper, you know, so the newsstand. So, you know, you have to have a newspaper in a big city. But here is another little one that I found. The door came with, no, that door is cut out and put back on. I think I tried to make them a little bit more realistic towards the end. So I cut out the door and then glued it on the, you know, onto a piece of chipboard that was bigger than this, and then stuck it back on there. That way, I don't know, it's hard to see, but there is a lip, so you can kind of tell it's recessed a little bit. Again, I printed out some signs myself, the corrugated paper for the doors, you know, a little bit. But another little building just to drop down, a garage. All right, here's another one that I did a little bit better job of, I think, on this one. But this one also has, I think, the name of the restaurant. You could change it in the PDF. The cocktail sign I actually put in myself. The cold beer I did. Ice cream I added. There's a door. Another door. And then I added this on the side just because, you know, a building this big inside of a city should have some kind of billboard or something on the side. I just found it online. Thought it was cute, so threw it on there. But drop that down in the city. Here's one that's papercraft. Another one that I added to. The laser lights was part of it. I added the beer and billiards. I had these little puffy letters, so I thought I'd stick it on there. Stick the R a little bit off like it was broken. I added a little nudes on the side so that looks like it's lit up, so it's pointing, hey, go back to the door. This came with it that you could cut out and tape together and put on there. But a nice little, just like a little bar you could drop down on the corner. Just give you something to maneuver around. All right, here's another purchased building. I think I got like a whole pack of them online somewhere. If I can find it, I'll put it down in the description below. Again, I found some graffiti online and just printed it out, cut it out, put it on there and covered it up with some matte Mod Podge, so it glues it down and at the same time kind of protects it. The deli name was part of the PDF, and I believe there were several other ones. That is, of course, added on myself. Back door and gridded out top so it's playable for any kind of game. All right, here is another papercraft. Again, I think this is when I was getting towards the end where I was getting better at cutting out stuff and getting it lined up. This one fits together really well. And this is all, you know, paper. I just added a name because it didn't have a name, and I thought this should have something on the bottom, so I just picked something I found online, glued it onto a piece of foam core, I believe, and then just stuck it on there so it stands out a little bit. But has some elevation, so if you're playing a game, that elevation matters. You know, like your hero's up on top of a building. You know, if you're somebody who can't fly or climb, you know, you kind of got a disadvantage if they're up here on the roof and they have a ranged weapon. All right, and here is my final papercraft building. And of course, this is my favorite. I purchased this online. That's why I said I'll put a link if I can find where I got these. But yeah, this is definitely it has to show up on the table. You know, billions to serve, make doom. But yeah, definitely if you need a little fast food thing, you know, has a little entrances. There's a little window, so if you actually set it up, you could have it drive through even. The unhappy meal, a rock in every box. But yep, definitely like this guy. My favorite papercraft. Here's one that was kind of in the middle. I used a papercraft outside. Like I would print out the sheets that you would make, but I glued it to the outside of a box, so it is kind of rigid. And to make this one a little different, in case I played something like Zombicide or some kind of, you're in a really bad neighborhood, I boarded up all the windows, made it look a little dilapidated. So this is definitely a bad spot. Cut out a little condemned sign, stuck it on there. So this building definitely looks like it's been condemned. But this is where I kind of started with making my own buildings. And then I moved on from here. Here's another one of my buildings that's kind of a hybrid. Again, I printed out the textures for a printed building, but then I glued it to foam core and kind of made it all dusty and rocky. So it's like a building that got knocked down, which I thought kind of fits. If you're having some kind of superhero game, you know, there are going to be buildings got knocked over by the villain or during the fight. So you could always throw one of these out if you had one of the other buildings kind of get collapsed. I mean, it wouldn't be the exact outside, but you could be like, hey, that building got hit. Boom, now it's a condemned building. All right, here is a foam core building. I printed out the windows and glued it on. I try to make it look like a small, maybe like an apartment building or something like that. I really don't like how this ended up, but I tried cutting out a grid that was 1 inch and gluing it on. Unfortunately, the gluing at it kind of discolored it, but it would still be playable. You see, I even put a bottom on it just so it'd have a little bit more structure. But it's not a bad looking building. It's just, I don't know if you've noticed, if you've been around, something I picked up on after I made it. There's no door into this building. All windows. Here's another one that's kind of a hybrid. That this is all printed out. The same kind of sticking foam core to the back of it to make it look broken. But this is where I started getting a little more creative and adding to it. Like I made these beams. It's just 3 of those skinny sticks glued together, painted red. But it gives you the eye, you know, if you look at that, you think those are I-beams in a building, even though probably a little oversized, but still it's just there to give you the idea that this is a collapsed building. All right. Here, let me move the camera back a little bit. You can see all of this. This is where I started thinking about, instead of building all my boxes, use some stuff that's pre-made. So this is foam core, and I just cut out some windows that I printed out. Printed out the sign, gave it a hotel name. I was using this for mostly superhero games, so Gotham. But this bottom is if you ever get those boxes for Christmas. So I started thinking, well, why don't I just paint up that box, glue some windows and that onto it, doors, and you've already have a perfect square that is pretty solid. So I went ahead with that with some future buildings. So here's that same idea, taking a Christmas box, and I just glued the lid upside down to it, covered it with a grid, glued some windows and a door to it. This is all on the front side. Add some, some advertisements. This is all Gotham type stuff. Even a little Star Wars thing just there. Just why not? But here's another, using that idea of taking a box that's already a square box that you don't have to build and just adding to it. Here's a smaller, of course it's a box with the lid glued on it upside down. I made this into a small general store, as you can see. Again, I used a piece of foam core, just glued a sign to it. Covered it in Mod Podge to give it a little strength. Windows are all printed out and glued on here. Name, some advertisements on it. More posters, advertisements. But a little something to drop on there, makes it an obstacle. You can play on the top, so if somebody has a way of getting on top, you got your height advantage. Here is another condemned building. This one I just took a regular box and I put a bunch of glue on it and some sand to give it some texture, and I did that to 3 of the sides, and then glued another piece of cardboard onto the front with that same texture. Put some really thin cardboard just to give it some details and appeal. On this one I painted in the behind, you can see they're all black, and then I tried to make it look like there's curtains, so there's actually paper behind there. There's actually, I don't know if the camera is showing it off, but there is actually some clear like food container. I cut it out and put it in there to be the windows, and then I had some paper that I colored and tried to make look like some old dingy curtains and put those in the windows, and then the door is just the actual cardboard from behind just painted black, just to try to show that it was like an open, dark door. But that's another condemned building. All right, here's something original that I made. I was kind of proud of at the time. This is a little newsstand that you could drop down. I had some posters on it, but this is just like a butter container I cut out tiny little newspapers and hung them up here and covered them in Mod Podge to give them a little strength. You see newspapers down here, the name of the place, some advertisements around it. I even thought enough to put a door in the back so the guy doesn't have to climb through the hole to get in. He has a little door in the back to get in. The only thing I wish I would have done is, you can see I never colored this in. I could have done that at some point. But yeah, this was something, a little original thing I thought up that I thought was pretty cool that I could drop down onto the table. All right, here's the first of the purchase things I have. This was a part that came with, I believe it was the Hero Clicks. There was a superhero version of Hero Clicks that had the table, and this was part of it. I think it had the Hulk, so you could punch stuff through the walls and that, but this always kept popping out. I hated it, so I just glued it in, because if I'm using it on the table, it's like those other broken down buildings, you just drop it. I got tired of this keep falling out and in. I wasn't playing the game, so I didn't need it to be exactly the right. All right, and then the last of my purchase buildings are these. I got these from, I believe it was a Kickstarter from Monster Fight Club, I believe is the name of the company. But most of the parts on these, you can see there's holes, there's levels on the inside that are there, so you could actually, take the top off and play on the interior. Most of the windows, if you can see, I don't know if the camera will catch it, but they're all punched out. So you could punch them out to have open windows. You could take the doors out. These are very, very nice. Unfortunately, I never got to use them. So they are brand new, put together, and never used. The Kickstarter had a lot of issues. They were trying to get the clips to work right, to hold the buildings, like all these issues. And by the time they got around to shipping to me, I was kind of already outside of my playing games with modern buildings and that. I had moved on to other stuff, and so they just sit assembled in my basement on the shelves, collecting dust. And there was a bunch of nice, as you can see, if I flip it over, everything's double-sided, so you can actually pick what, So there's double windows. You got, for the Kickstarter, I think it was, you got 3 buildings, small, medium, large. I think the extra building was either a stretch goal or something they threw in because of the delays. There is a whole bag of more little dividers, fences, ladders. There's a tree. There's different vents, covers. Like here's some, if you look right here, that's a security door. So you can punch out one of the doors and push that door into it, and it looks like it's more like a secured door. There's a dumpster in here, and I believe there's actually a fire you can put into it. So that's what I said. This was a nice project. It just took so long that it was past when I was actually playing with them anymore. But here's another one. Graffiti ones. So you see there's some nice ones on the inside. So if you wanted to, you could hide the graffiti ones, but I kind of liked it for that other building. But again, you can see where the windows could kind of punch out. All these will punch out, so you could stick, I believe there was units in the bag that you could stick an air conditioning unit, so you could actually have a unit up here or any more. Since I have a bunch of 3D printers and that, I could print out, units to stick on top and that. Again, these are beautiful if you look at it. I mean, they're sturdy. I mean, they're, oh, there's the lid fell out. But you can see where there's holes where you can put steps in. Here's the roof, or the roof. They just sit, if you look in the corner, so there's like a little shelf there. So this just drops down on top of it and lays on that shelf. So that's what I said. If you were playing a game like Zombicide or something more tactical, like even, Marvel Crisis Protocol, which is kind of what I got these for, but then I never bought the game or got into it, so they kind of sat. But these are beautiful, so if you're somebody who actually plays those games pretty regularly and needs some train, Monster Fight Club. Again, you see the buildings on the inside. Very, very nice. But yeah, as you can see, they've been sitting around just, collecting dust in my basement. Like I said, they're all punched out. So if I ever get back into playing superheroes, I'm definitely going to bust these out. All right, here's the first building I 3D printed when I got it. Just a little store. I don't even know what this would be. Like a little trailer, maybe. Something that just sits on the corner, a little convenient. You run in, you grab, a drink and a pack of cigarettes or something. But I did that one first just to see if I could. And it didn't turn out too bad, so I thought I'd try to print something a little bit bigger. So this is the biggest building I printed. The only other building I printed, because like I said, I kind of stopped playing after a while. And there's a few things I've learned since then. Like you can see where it peels up a little bit here. I was printing right to the bed and stuff like that because it was so big. I'm like, it should stick, but now I use either a raft or a brim on everything I print. I know it uses more material, but I really don't care. The stuff I'm buying is, you buy it in bulk, you can get it for like $10 a roll. So using up, if I, out of the 10, if I throw one away, it would cost me $10, but then I didn't waste all the, like I didn't have this seals breaking and it looks worse. I started painting it up. I got color on it, started painting the windows and that, but then I quit playing, so I just kind of threw it on the side. I think the top comes off this, maybe not. Yep. You see, I just kind of glued it and kind of where they were peeling away. I put these red foam underneath it to give it some support so you can't see. So if you zoom in there, you can kind of see the red in between. There was a gap. That's actually this red foam in the back. I was new to trying to do all this stuff, so that's how I thought I'd get away with seeing it without having to print it something else on the inside and that. Stick something roughly the same color in between, and you don't notice it unless I really pick it out for you. But, once I lost interest in playing modern games and stuff like that, this guy kind of went by the wayside. You can see the scar up here in the back where something happened to it while I was printing. I'm like, that's the back of the building. Nobody cares. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, check out the next video right here. It's packed with more great content. And as always, keep on gaming.